Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com.
Welcome, everyone, to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast. I'm Carolyn Woodard and the host, and today I'm here with Steve Longenecker, who is our Director of IT Consulting. So, Steve, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I've been at Community IT for 20 years. I know that because my son is 20 years old, and I started right a month after he was born.
Wow.
So I've been helping clients with all manner of IT for a long time now.
You wanted to talk about Google Groups?
One of the things that I do enjoy talking about is Google Groups, because it's kind of a unique bit of functionality that Google offers that there's not really any parallel for in the Microsoft 365 world. So it's worth kind of talking about, I think, because it's kind of interesting. We actually have one client that's exploring. They're a Microsoft 365 client, but they're exploring standing up. Well, they've stood up a Google Workspace expressly for this purpose. They're not using it yet, but they're piloting it, playing with it a little bit, and they're interested in using it because it's pretty cool what it can do. They're running into trouble because a lot of their customers, I guess, or clients that this nonprofit works with are stakeholders from government people, and the government has like sometimes they have their own like regulations about you need to be certified a certain way, and actually Google Groups for Business is certified, I think, to the standards that their clients need, but relatively recently. Like it's not something that they've done. I don't know when Google did it, maybe in the last year or two, and so you know how government can.
They still have it in their mind that it doesn't qualify.
We can't use this. Yeah. So
yeah.
that's the holdup for this client, because otherwise they're really pleased with what it can do. So should I tell you what it does, how it works?
Well, can I take just a step back and say I have a Gmail account, but I do not work for a company that is using Google Workspace. So what you're talking about with Google Groups is if your business, your nonprofit, your company is using Google Workspace and you have your email through that, it's not a Gmail account, it's your company account. But through using Google Workspace, you can set up something called Google Groups. Do I have that correctly?
That's right. Yeah. So there are all manner of people have probably been using Google Groups. I use Google Groups in my personal life to organize. Well, I'm not in charge of the groups, but I participate in a number of groups that are around organizing and pick up sporting things. And so I subscribe to this group. Emails go out. Are we going to play this week? Are we not going to play this week? It's basically a list, and Google has made that available, just like they have Gmail, more or less, quote unquote, for free. I mean, they sell advertising along with it or whatever. It's the deal that we make. So Google Groups for Business is part of the suite of services that the Google Workspace has, where yes, particularly nonprofits that have their email in Gmail or Google, and they have a domain name. It's not at gmail.com, it's at nonprofit.org. And they may have their files in Google Drive, and they may be using Google Voice, but they can pick and choose. They don't have to use all of these suite of services to still be in Google Workspace. They can just use the email if they want. But one of the options, one of the things that's in there is this Google Groups for Business. But it would be branded with their email address, their domain name, and because it's part of the Google Workspace thing, it wouldn't be it wouldn't be inundated with the ads. Google may, I don't know actually off the top of my head whether Google says that they aren't even collecting any data, but if they do, it would be very aggregated and anonymized and all of that. But they're definitely not selling advertising against it. It's a service, and it comes across as a fairly professional service. Anybody that is an IT person can tell that it's coming through a Google server, But that's not that, any more than your mail might be coming from a Google server if you're using a Google Workspace as a nonprofit. So it's very cool, yeah, and it does things a little differently than an email. And I was thinking about telling you brief history of how this sort of evolved, if you don't
Sure.
mind. Okay.
Sure, I'd love it.
Sure. So in the beginning, there was, one kind of mailbox, a user mailbox. So, there might be like George@nonprofit.org, and there might be Edwana@nonprofit.org, Kim@nonprofit.org. And very quickly, and that was a long time ago, very quickly, it became useful to have distribution lists where you might email donations at nonprofit.org. And then instead of that going to a mailbox, it would go into the mail server that would then send a copy to George and Kim at Edwana, the three people responsible for collecting donations. But those emails didn't live anywhere except in their individual mailboxes, right? It was just it hit that server and got copied to the three members of the list. At some point, someone thought, well, it would be pretty smart. Some people probably thought on the customer side, we'd like to have a permanent record of these emails in one place. So let's create a user account called donations. But it's a user account, and then we're just going to let George and Edwana and Kim share the password, and they can log into donations whenever they want to, read the emails, deal with the emails, and so forth. That's not very secure, and that's one of the major problems at this point with that kind of approach, what we call a shared user account. So both Microsoft and Google have avoided that or found a way around that security problem by having, in Microsoft's case, it's called a shared mailbox. There's no credentials for it, right? You don't log into that mailbox at all. You log in as George. And then as George, you've used George's credentials, you can access this shared mailbox, but you can't get to it unless you've logged in as a user, George, Kim, or Edwana. On the Google side, they call it Google Groups. And so there might be a group called donations or donate at nonprofit.org. And so you log in as George, or you log in as Kim, or you log in as Edwana, and then you can go to groups.google.com and you see all the groups that you're a member of, and you might be a member of Donate. You click on that, and then you can see all the emails that's come into that email address. And you can have the email actually forwarded to your inbox if you want, so that you don't have to go to that place. You can just see them come directly in, but they're coming in through that address. So up to that point in the description, there's pretty much good parity between Microsoft's world and Google's world. Where Google Groups is really cool, in my opinion, is that they have a lot more control. They provide a lot more control over the settings and configurations that you can put on this. So they have three roles: owner, manager, and member. I kind of put owner and manager together. I mean, they're not the same. There are distinctions, but for keep explanation's sake, it's simpler to think of them as two. But you could, like, for example, have a list, a Google group, where you say only owners and managers can post to this group, and members can read the posts, but the members can't post to it themselves. And that generates something that most nonprofits don't need because they're already getting it from MailChimp or SendGrid or, name your marketing tool, because most nonprofits have a marketing platform where they send out these mail blasts to all their lists, raising, whether it's fundraising or alerting people to important topical events that need a response or whatever. So that one's not like a game changer, but it's cool that you can do it. You could also have like the way a donate Google group would work is you say that only owners and managers and members can read the posts, but anyone can post to it, and post means just sending an email to that address. So anyone in the world can send an email to donate@nonprofit.org, but the only people that can read the emails are the members of the list, and the only members of the list are the 3 staff people at the nonprofit who are responsible for fielding all of these emails that get sent to that address, hopefully not spam, but instead saying, I'd love to donate to your organization. I hear such great things. Tell me how I can donate. And then they would respond and say, oh, that's so great that you're interested. How much? So that is a traditional, and that, a list, a shared mailbox works for that in Microsoft 365, or even a distribution list works for that. It's the in-between that it gets really cool. You could have a Google group where members can post. Owners and managers get to decide who the members are. You could say that the postings don't become public until an owner or a manager vets the posting, moderates the posting, that like there's a trigger that happens. But then what you end up with is a listserv. So the thing that I imagine this being really powerful for a nonprofit is not where you're sending out, one-to-many mail blasts like MailChimp, and not where you're having many, many, many all over the internet sending in to a small group that are fielding, donation and opportunities, but something in between where maybe the nonprofit has 200 academics across the country. They don't have the email address of the nonprofit. They work for universities, but they're experts in whatever that issue that nonprofit is covering. They're experts on hunger. They're experts on Middle East peace or whatever. And they have signed up to be subject matter experts and to help this nonprofit with whatever the things are, like, and maybe they're crafting, all they're doing is just reviewing pieces before they get published, but they're trusted, but you want them to be able to talk to each other. And you may not even in that case need to moderate them. They're all professional people and they can be trusted not to. But basically then you say, okay, members can post. The trick is that not anyone can be a member. And in fact, you can't even see this group. It's invisible to the outside world. You need to, be added by us to even know that it exists. But once you've been added to it, then you're going to get emails from the group, but anybody in the group can email to the group. And that might be perfect for that need. It's traditionally it was called a listserv, but there just aren't that many listserv applications out there anymore. I don't know why, partly because I think it's the traditional listservs ran into the grounds, ran into some of the spam problems. They were abused, but Google Groups has sort of threaded the needle pretty well. And so, yeah, you have this opportunity for many people to communicate with each other through a group that they sign up for or are signed up for by someone in the organization. And there can be moderation. There doesn't have to be moderation. The membership can be something that's kind of automated, or the membership can be, manually added by the owner or manager of the group. But that's the thing that I think probably more nonprofits could possibly leverage for their to advance whatever their mission is, this Google Group thing. But it only is in Google Groups. I mean, there are other platforms that do it, but Microsoft doesn't really have, to my knowledge, anything that's quite works that way.
That has those granular controls.
Yeah. You can set up a massive distribution list that would kind of work that way, but then there's no, it's just getting copied out to many different places.
Hard to moderate.
Yeah.
I had a question about that. So you were saying the donate at nonprofit.org, and this may not be something that Google Groups can do, but could you so it goes to the three people, but you only want one person responding, but you don't know which one is going to be the first one to see it and be able to respond. Is there, like within Google Groups, can you kind of control that as well? Like if George responds, nobody else has to, or they can see that there has been a response. So it give you that kind of control too?
Yes. So there is, and there's so that is a piece of functionality that Google added a few years ago, and it's called a collaborative inbox feature. And you turn that on, and then yeah, you actually can assign threads to each other or to yourself. And then once it's assigned, you sort of that that's been flagged. I'll take care of this one, you take care of that one, kind of a thing. And then if you work in the group, this takes some discipline, because if you're just responding to the email that comes to your own personal inbox because of membership, then it might not get seen. But if in the group you're responding, also the conversations are tracked there as well through the Google conversation view, it's called, and you can sort of see what George, if you're Kim, you can see what, not only that George assigned this particular piece of email to himself, but also what his response was, and then what the response to that was, and you can sort of follow the whole thing. And it's handy too, like, maybe Kim is the manager of the team and doesn't actually do any of the actual work. That's not the right way to say that, but isn't actually responding to the emails, does want to have visibility into it, but doesn't want to have to actually, have the emails coming into her inbox at all.
It's not her job to respond.
It's not her job to respond, or even to
she
know.
supervises. Yeah.
But she does want to be able to, whenever she needs to, go to the group in Google Groups and see what George and Iwana have been doing, for the last week or 2 weeks or whatever, and she can just do that and doesn't have to get the emails herself, but does know that they're being assigned and taken care of by the people that she supervises. So yeah, that's a handy feature for sure, that being able to assign things.
Yeah, it seems like it would be quite a time saver as well. I know a lot of times in organizations, there's the initial, like there's the question and the response, but then there could be, just a lot of time spent trying to figure out, did somebody respond to this person who had this question? So being able to see it all there without having to repeat and follow up and check, et cetera, would be a real productivity gain.
Yep.
I mean, it seems like something that there are some other tools that do something similar, like, Discord or Slack, where you could have a group that you're all talking amongst yourself and sharing an article or sharing a task.
Yeah.
But I feel, to me, like one of the genius things about this is that I have worked with volunteer groups where, again, like the time spent training people to be able to use Slack kind of defeats the purpose of using it to begin with. And you have moderators who are helping the people with technical questions about Slack or just getting used to Slack, a tool like Slack. And so using something that your volunteers or your staff are already used to, like
it's email. At the end of the day, it's email. Right. Yeah. No, you're right.
Just take that whole thing out of it, and it's something that you could use right away and be really productive right away. That seems like, and you already have it. If you're in Google Workspace, you already have access to that. Is that correct?
Well, the
Google Groups.
Yes, if the nonprofit already has it, right, and then the people that are the members of the group don't even need to have anything to do with Google. They just need to have a working email address to be able to interact with the group. Right.
That's great, because then it expands as you were saying with the experts example, like they have a university email, but they're on this email list and can see who's responded and what's going on. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's still a lot of, I mean, yes, you're bringing up of like Discord and Slack is right on, because you're right. I think in many ways that those platforms could supplant this and do it better. It's just that you're also right that not everyone's there yet, right? I mean, email is still like it's what everybody can fall back to as the standard like communication method for a computer.
Well, and I love your example of the experts, subject matter experts. Like if you're getting someone to volunteer their time to help you with this topic policy, you don't want to also have to train them to use Slack. If
Right.
they just respond to an email when they're doing the rest of their emails, then that just makes it easier for them to be those kinds of volunteer experts.
Yep. Yep. You can make rules about whether the posting comes from the group or comes from the person
The
that's
individuals.
participating in the group. Now that obviously you can see that the dynamics vary. Like if you're replying to a request for a donation or to give a donation, they want to donate. Maybe George and Kim want to respond as donate because it could be that they're
Sounds more
gonna
official.
that well or that they might end up tag teaming sometimes, right? Like maybe George is gonna be out tomorrow. George responds today. George is out tomorrow. Kim can pick up the thread, and the whole time you're just getting emails back from donate.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a little anonymous, but whatever.
it sounds official.
It's fine. Yeah, yeah. Thanks for your interest, and they could, you can still maybe put your
Yeah.
name at the bottom if you want to, but it's clearly coming from this email address, donate, not coming from Kim or George or whatever. So it also, makes it feel like you're still in the right place if you're the sender.
That makes sense. So I have two more quick questions.
Sure.
One is, how hard is this to set up? Like a lot of organizations that are using Google Workspace are using it because it's very easy to get started and you don't have
Yeah.
to have a big technical background to set up emails in Google Workspace. So at this level, is it something you can teach yourself? Do they have walkthrough tutorials? Is it difficult?
It's very easy to set up. It's not much harder to set up in fact, it's not harder to set up than a regular user. You just Google it and you can find very nice instructions. I think some of the challenges would be if you already have info at, for example, or donate at as user mailboxes, and now you want to switch to using Google Groups because you're like, oh, this is a great idea. I want to do this. Then there might be a challenge because you can't give a group the same email address that a user mailbox already has. So then you might need to rename the current user to be like old info or something, and right away create the new one.
Yeah.
And then you have this question of like, well, what about all the historical email that's in my user mailbox? Can I get that over to my Google group so it's all in one place? And the answer to that is yes, but that part's not easy. Like
More
that takes
complicated.
some back end command line tools. We've done it many times, and we do it for our clients that want to make this conversion because they get the security benefits of having it be groups rather than sharing passwords around, particularly when MFA is now like just required. And then how do you share MFA because it's on your phone? And do you have to always call George and say, hey, can you let me in? You can't do that. So we have people switching. I would tell a someone who's like working at a nonprofit to just call the current info mailbox, call it old info, free up that name, create the Google group, call the new Google group info at, and live with the fact that the historical data is in the old mailbox for a while, and it becomes less and less important the further you get away from when you cut that over. But the groups are not hard to set up. There's all those settings, all that granular control that you have is might feel a little bit daunting, but again, Google's instructions are very clear, and a lot of the defaults work fine. And I think it's pretty intuitive. It makes sense. Do I want everyone on the internet to be able to post to this, or do I only want the people that are members to be able to post? It depends on what your use case is. But Google's instructions kind of explain all of that. Some tips that Google gives one of them that I think is pretty good is that you can have all of the emails sent through the group from and to the group have like a little prepend on the subject line. So you might say that it might say nonprofit subject matter experts, as like a little prepend to whatever the subject line. That's kind of long. So that's not a good my example is not a good example because it's too long, but something shorter. But the point is that when it comes into your inbox, you right away know that it's from this group because it has that little thing at the top that sort of gives it as a clue, and that's helpful for people who are members of many groups. So I like
or get a lot of emails.
Yeah, or get a lot of emails. So I like in my personal life that I'm a member of a number of these sports organizing pickup games, and this one's for Petworth, the neighborhood that I live in. This one's for Bethesda, the neighborhood that I don't live in, but I go to sometimes. And like I just right away can see, when the email hits my inbox, which group it belongs to. So doing that is advised by Google, and I advise people listening to this to do that. The last thing that's a little bit of concern to us is that though Google has engineered this great solution that we like a lot, and do think it's wonderful, it is different than a user mailbox. And so if you have a third-party backup of all of your email and Google Drive files and all of that, which we do recommend to our customers and clients, and recommend to the people who are listening to this podcast that you get that. There's lots of different backup services. But Google's APIs don't make it easy for those third-party tools to get to the Google group emails, so they end up not being backed up. So that potentially is a problem. What we have done as our workaround, and we stole this idea from one of those third-party backups that had a knowledge base article that they recommended. We're like, oh, well, that's a great idea. Is that you have a user account called, Google Group member or something. I mean, again, it's kind of too long, but a user account that you make a member of all of your groups. No one logs into that. No one logs into that user account ever or anything. It's just there. And especially if each of your groups has that little prepend, so that all of the subject, all the emails come in with an identifier at the top, then that gets backed up. That mailbox gets backed up. And so in the event that your workspace gets destroyed or something terrible happens, whatever that disaster is, you wouldn't be able to restore the Google groups perfectly, but you would at least have all of those emails, because you would have had them forwarded into this user mailbox that would have been backed up, and you can sort them and filter them by those identifiers at the prepend. So that's another little tip for people to consider.
So it's kind of like a little ghost member of every group.
It's not doing anything.
It just hangs out.
It just hangs out and collects the mail from all of them. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great idea.
I really wish Google had just made their API a little bit more flexible in that regard, but they didn't, or maybe there was some reason they couldn't. But that's been our workaround. So when we help our clients set up Google Groups, we do that. We set up this sort of ghost member. That's a great way of saying it.
Well, one thing that is so lovely about Google is that they do walk you. It is geared toward people.
Yes, it is. The language of their instructions are very friendly. Not friendly like, pat you on the back friendly, but just like not too technical.
Accessible.
Accessible is a better word than friendly. Yeah. Yep. I agree. Yep.
No, that is if you're already using Google Workspace and you want to explore this, you could set a small one up and just play around with it.
Yep.
And there's lots of resources on Google for how to manage it.
Yeah.
So my last question, you've talked about it a little bit so far, but the security of it. So are there any security concerns? It sounds like it actually solves some security problems. So
well, it's certainly better than having a user account like info at or donate at that you're sharing around amongst members of your organization staff, because you shouldn't be sharing passwords. And even if you're sharing passwords, the MFA is the real challenge. So you don't have to do that. You log in as you and then access the group through the groups, through your identity that you're a member of it. I think that in terms of getting into the group, it's as secure as your user accounts are. So if you have MFA or I guess in Google's parlance, it's 2SV, but two-step verification, you should be in pretty good shape. I do think, you don't want, you can think of all those settings, those configurations that they allow, provide security options. Like, for example, do you want members of the group to be able to see the other members of the groups? Like, do you want to be able to list the members or not? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I'm not saying you should never allow that, because like maybe you're 200 subject matter experts. There's a real value in them being able to see each other and know that they're all members. Oh yeah. Oh, my colleague from Nebraska State is also in this. Good. Because that person knows so much about this too. I wouldn't want them to not be on the list, and they can just see that they are. But you might also have situations where you want that to be private. Maybe it's a group that's sharing about health concerns, and it's important that people have a certain amount of privacy in that regard, right? So you have that privacy set up. And then any list that this is not just to Google Groups, but in general, I mean, email is not a super duper secure technology. Like, it's very old, and its protocols are dated in that respect, and so you're always going to be risking spam and phishing and even like abuse, like someone sending vulgar or inflammatory messages through email, and it's like there's not a lot of protections for that. So a certain amount of obscurity, if you have an email address that's not published anywhere on the web, it shouldn't be getting hit a ton. But if you're concerned about that, like let's say that your members are minors, okay, so maybe you should have moderation. And basically it's a lot of work, but maybe anything that's sent to that doesn't actually show up for the members until someone on your staff has read it and said, yep, this is fine, and let it through. Otherwise, what if one morning you wake up and all of these 16 and 17-year-old kids that are members of your list are getting all these emails that are just totally inappropriate. And it's got your domain name on them. So those are things to consider, but that's not a Google Group thing. That's just in general the world of email that we live in, and we have to sort of take steps to be safe.
Well, how much are you going to moderate it?
Yes.
Right? How involved are you going to be? How big is your group?
That's right.
That's a huge issue. If someone...
And the trade-offs.
Yeah, can you kick people out of your group? Like if somebody,
you definitely
gets fired from the university, and then you don't want them in your expert group anymore.
That's right.
Like
That's
that.
Right.
So
yeah.
And definitely, I think we've said this in other podcasts or webinars, but you want to be careful if you have info@nonprofit.org or those types of generic emails that are easy for someone to guess and try to try and hack that account. So having that email go to a Google group would seem to be more secure than having it be its own mailbox.
That's right, because there's no credentials to take there.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
Well, this is all really helpful. Do you have any last words you want to leave us with about Google Groups?
No, well, I guess I would say that if you are excited about this and you try it out and it works, and you get some traction with some of your stakeholders, and any of your stakeholders are in the government and they put up a fuss, push, because I think it's okay. I think Google has done the certification, and it would really help all the rest of the nonprofits that work with government agencies to get government agencies over that hump of accepting that Google is a full-fledged safe professional platform. Service that can be trusted. Yeah.
There are some really big organizations that use Google Workspace.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I'm kind of surprised
they don't use Microsoft.
Yeah.
So interesting. I think, we've talked about this before too, but because it started out as this consumer like Gmail,
right?
It's got a lot of pros to that, in that they're very customer oriented, but there is that little they have to overcome that idea that it's this free, not as professional, you can't do as much, but they really have just added so many features to it. It really is a professional platform that you can use as a very large organization, and certainly as a nonprofit of any size.
Yeah, I just Googled it. Google, thank you very much. And the certification that I'm thinking of is called Fedramp. Fed as in federal, obviously, and then ramp, R-A-M-P. I'm not sure what that stands for, but so they have done the Fedramp authorization for Google Groups for Business. Not necessarily there's like high and medium. So it's like I'm not sure that you're going to ever get Google Groups to be accepted if your stakeholders are all like, DoD or yeah. But if you're just working with, Health and Human Services or whatever, they should be okay with it. But we've definitely experienced resistance. It's kind of interesting. It takes time. It takes time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's one thing just to leave people with is that so many nonprofits use Google Workspace, and more are using Google Workspace. And there's a lot of MSPs that can't even help you with Google Workspace. So just put in a little plug for us. You can get in touch with us, talk to Steve, talk to other people on our team about MSPs. We are an MSP that can support Google Workspace at nonprofits.
Yeah, we do both. The two big players obviously are Microsoft 365 and Google. At least if you start talking about email, and we do both. And like I said, I have a client that, once they get through this sort of FedRAMP issue, which I think it will happen in the next year or so, they're probably going to be straddling where they have their email is going to remain in Microsoft 365. They're going to use a separate domain name, but it's still there, clearly identified as with them. It's going to be .net instead of .org. Mm-hmm. But they're going to use that for their Google Groups, and they're pretty excited about it because right now they're using this other list service that is actually a server. They need to maintain a server on premise. Oh. It's really old software. It's really expensive. Every year they have to spend all this money on renewing the support agreement. And they're like, well, Google Groups does all this basically for free, but we just got to get it rolling. So it'll happen. Yeah.
Amazing. That is a great way to think about Google Groups being able to add value to something that your nonprofit is doing or wants to do. Great. Well, thank you so much, Steve. I feel like I've learned so much.
Well, thanks for leading the conversation, today. Carolyn. Great talking to you.
It's going to be great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.